What a day to be alive. Welcome to Rise Up with Rick. We are passionate about helping you extract the most out of every day and exploring and enhancing all things physical, mental and emotional well-being and performance. We are brought to you by runners.com. That's runnez.com, as well as rickmirabella.com. Radio, let's launch now.
G'day and welcome to Rise Up with Rick. Today, joining me from Hawaii, the absolute Australian rules football legend, now a real high-performance leader, and one of the great men in culture and high performance all over the world. And he's really changing the game in lots of ways. I welcome again from Hawaii, Paul Roos.
How are you, mate? Good to see you again.
Oh, Roosy, great to see you. Last time we caught up was in your beautiful house there in South Melbourne, but you're sitting away over the screen in Hawaii now. Where do we find you and why?
Yeah, so we bought a house in Hawaii about 12, 13 years ago, I think. Yeah, largely because Hawaii is a beautiful spot, but also Tammy's family is from sort of Northern California. We found ourselves holidaying here a fair bit. So it was always a reasonable point, not halfway, obviously, but as close as you're going to get without being in the middle of the ocean. And then we moved out probably nearly 3 years ago, maybe now, permanently, but I'm backwards and forwards fairly regularly. I don't mind the flight, 10 hours back to Australia and then sort of 5.5 to San Jose, where Tammy's mum is. So it's a good spot to be.
Great mix. It is a palatable flight, isn't it? Hawaii to Australia. And obviously with Tammy's family and San Jose, beautiful. It's agreeing with you. I know you got a lot on your plate and you do a lot of things, and we'll talk about that, but you're looking amazing. And it's definitely, I don't normally get straight into this, but what's the daily routine at the moment for Roosy? You're looking amazing. So we'll talk about meditation and everything. So I'm no doubt that's heavily involved, but go through everything day to day, the average non-negotiables for Paul Roos on the daily.
Yeah, particularly the morning. I mean, the good part about the Australian time zone is, even if you're doing a keynote or a workshop that starts at sort of 8, 9 Australia time, it's 11, 12. So you always get your mornings to yourself, which is good, which I enjoy. So meditation's always first cab off the rank in the day. And then, try and do some exercise, which is not hard to do because every day you look out the window and it's either 27 or 28. So there's not a day where you look out and don't feel like you want to go for a walk or a run. Yeah, so typically day on, day off, weights and running mostly. Then walking every now and then, bike riding, a bit of beach and stuff like that. And then the work during the day, which is great. And then there's no shortage of American sport to watch either. So if you're sitting home at night and watching that. So, that's a pretty typical day, which, as I said, the time zone is great to do the work in Australia.
You've created and carved that niche and life for yourself. So amazing way to live, but you definitely practice every single thing you preach, which we love. Now, for the guys that aren't familiar with Roosy, we've got a couple of episodes. He was good enough to catch up twice, 2 or 3 years ago in COVID times, but he's obviously a 356 game legend, 7-time All Australian, 5-time BNF. He's done it all off the top of my head. Fitzroy legend, team of the century, Sydney Swans, but of course Premiership coach in 2005. And Roosy, I think that era, from meeting you a few times, and obviously a lot of listening and following you forever as just a park footballer. That era when you retired, between you retired and when you commenced assistant coaching and then senior coaching, was a pretty pivotal time in you looking at and retrospectively the way you guys went about it in the 80s and 90s, the way your leaders held themselves, and the way good cultures came to be. So I need you again, because there's nothing more poignant than this, to really succinct what you went back in 98, wrote some notes, but then how you came to be there, like the 80s and coming through the Fitzroy Football Club in the 80s, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it was very different back then. As 1980 growing up in Donvale, you had zoning systems. So you're zoned to the under 19s, which I think, to be perfectly frank, was a much better system because it allowed way more players the opportunity to get access to an AFL team. So, for instance, purely from a numbers point of view, we would have had 50, 60 guys from our zone go to the Fitzroy Football Club. Multiply that by 12. So you're talking about, hundreds and hundreds of guys getting access to AFL teams through the under 19. So that was how I started. Was good enough to get a game, in the seniors in 1982. Then played 13 years for Fitzroy. Then went to Sydney for 4. But great leaders and great role models back in the early Fitzroy days. Probably didn't realise at the time how good they were and how lucky I was to have guys like Gary Wilson, Bernie Quinlan, Laurie Serafini, Mickey Conlon, and then the next group, Matty Rendell, Scotty Clayton. It was just a great time to be playing football. And we were semi-professional as well. So we'd go to work and train in the morning, train at night, barely enough time to eat and sleep, and then come back and do it again the next day. But you're right, 1998 was pretty pivotal. I sat down at the end of 1998, October 1998, because leadership was changing purely and simply because the industry was changing. It was going from a semi-professional to a fully professional environment. So the last 4 years I played with Sydney was the only time I didn't work. Now players were coming in, in the mornings, training most of the day, doing their weights, recovery, all those sorts of things. So I was able to sit down and just write down some notes around some of the leaders that I liked through the eyes of a player. What were some of the things I liked and didn't get, so I wrote them down on a piece of paper, which is great, and that turned out to be an incredible, piece of paper that I've still got to this day that I still, talk a lot about. And there's a lot of great things on there. I then went overseas for 10 months, which is a planned trip to the States, and I was fortunate to then go to the San Francisco 49ers, Chicago Bears, Chicago Bulls, Denver Broncos, LA Lakers, San Diego Chargers, hanging out with Pete Sampras because one of my best mates was his fitness coach. Went to the Major League Baseball All-Star game, saw Gazy play for the San Antonio Spurs, went to Super Bowl, went to Wimbledon French Open. So some incredible learnings there as well. Then came back, worked on the Olympics for C7. I worked the midnight to 6 a.m. shift. So I'm still keeping contact with the 3 people that watched me on that shift, which is great. And then I went into coaching full-time, started 2001 season, and then lo and behold, halfway through 2002, Rodney Eade stepped down and they asked me to do the job. So, that's how it all happened.
Well, we did cover it a bit more in depthly 2 or 3 years ago, but I do love that phase because the Fitzroy time, and you mentioned some of those great players that you play with. You referenced Brett Stevens there, one of your good mates who was fitness coach there. There was a good era of footballers, and all those boys. Steve, I was your age, but a few boys a bit older. When you get to the level as a footballer, even especially back then, it was a very macho era, and we'll talk a bit more about that. You didn't have the time or the resources or probably the wherewithal to know where you'd use a 1986 MVP, which is for those out of Australia, the Brownlow medal, of which is the most coveted, umpire voted, referee voted, depends where you are. This is voted by his peers, and he's voted the best player in the whole country. So using a bit of Americanism, Roosy, you were the world's best player that year, and on the whole. Now you could have easily got ahead of yourself, but the way the leadership of that Fitzroy and the way you described it, it's no surprise to see the way you turned out as a human being. I know a beautiful family upbringing as well, but the ability to come through that and think about others all the time, and the way not just the best 5 players on the list or the most talented 5 players on the list are feeling about things. And I reckon that was a big part of that dossier that you would have written, like how does this leadership look through my eyes, but then how is it perceived through a young bloke not getting a game barely getting a game in the twos per se. And I reckon you've always done that well, mate, from the outside looking in, and then just a little bit getting to know you pretty well. The American side of it, when you toured there in '99-ish, was it?
No, yeah.
Was there any takeaways? Because we were still like you said, you had 3 or 4 years of full-time footy before that. Was there any takeaways from that from a cultural perspective, or these are all questions off the cuff, of course?
Probably Denver Broncos was really interesting. That was probably the cultural piece. I remember I got a chance to see the head of recruiting, or whatever they called it, had a really good conversation with him, and we chatted backwards and forwards. And he said, Roosy, one of the things I'm really big on is character. If there's a line ball decision and it's the guy's the Ducks of the school, or he's been in the chess club or whatever, I always go for that particular person, which was great because that reinforced my beliefs. Seeing the 2 best players at Fitzroy when I got there were Bernie Quinlan and Gary Wilson, but just great people, really good people. That was interesting. Probably the technical side of it more. San Francisco 49ers, when I went and watched them train, just the incredible diligence and the way they set out their training session was amazing. There wasn't a wasted second. let alone a wasted minute. It was like clockwork. It was like a military operation. And that really taught me how to manage my time better during training, rather, get it organized, get it sorted, and train for the way you play. Don't just go out, kick the kick or circle work. Now, that's not to say you don't do it, but don't just do it because, it seems like the best thing to do. Make sure everything is intentional in your training to get better. That was really pivotal. The other thing was Chicago Bears. I mean, their facility was worth like $200 million, so we're never going to duplicate that. But they had an indoor facility with 2 cameras, one at each end, and 2 cameras, one at each. So 4 cameras total, 2 at each end and 2 on the side. And what they did is they taped every single training session, and it automatically went back to their ITs. And I thought that's a great idea. We don't tape training. We basically do it, and that's all. So I went back. It was quite funny. I said to my IT guy, Anthony Carl, I said, Carly, we need to, get something hooked up. So he went and I think used a sponsor. We got a cherry picker. So he had to sit in the cherry picker of the whole training session. He was afraid of heights too, I think. So he had to sit up the top there with his handheld camera. But it was great. That was game changing as well, because we were able to then rehearse and review training. So we would watch training just about every time before a training session happened. We'd review the last one, cut out some clips, show the players. So they were probably the main things that came out of it, but just some really good conversations and really good opportunity to meet great people.
Yeah, and it is all about people and relationships for you and for all good leaders. It should be definitely ahead of your time in a few of those things. Definitely filming training at the turn of the millennium wouldn't have been happening in Australia, which I love that. And you're right, we can't compete with some of the money, especially in that era, but you can definitely bring all the philosophies and methodologies over. The character thing's a big one because I think of Paul Roos, I think most people do, and they think of authenticity, number one, first and foremost. They think of relationships, and I think, and we'll talk about bit moment, is just that present moment, just always controlling what you can control and the next minute in front of you. But we'll talk about that a bit more. But the authenticity and the relationships, coming into a new club, not a new club, a new role, assistant coach to Rocket, and then obviously Rocket moved away. You didn't have a heap of time to build 45, 50 relationships. What in a football sense, before we talk business and other stuff, how did you manage that as still a relatively young man yourself? Like you're barely not even 40 yourself. So how were you going with this, getting around to all the players on the list and trying to really put your spin on your relationship building and the way you did things?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to systemize it. I was lucky at Sydney that I'd actually played with them. So, for the guys that I played with, it was probably easy, but you have to systemize the relationships. You have to be intentional. So what I would do is make sure pre-season, which has obviously got a bit more time, you got around and made sure you spoke to a lot of players. But in season, the first training session, I made sure someone else would take the training session and make sure I'd go and talk to every single player about their game. But you have to be intentional. Sometimes people think relationships is, parties, perks, and ping pongs. We'll just put on the Friday night drinks, and everyone will get on well. Now they sort of do, but it's not the same as you and I. Mate, let's go and have a coffee. Why don't we? Yep, no worries. I'll meet you for coffee instead of business meeting. We have coffee, we have breakfast together. How's life going? What's happening? And we can have a really meaningful conversation, and then we can start to get to know each other really, really well. And so it's being intentional about your relationships, because the stronger our relationships, the more we're going to have really honest conversations. And that's what high performing teams do. They have honest conversations built around really good relationships.
Yeah, and you build that trust enough, and you've done this billions of times, but you can build that trust where if you got to have those hard conversations, they know where it's coming from, a place of love, because you can't. There's no point being fluffy and telling everyone how good they are all the time, especially in a high performance unit where you're really in the firing line, you're in the trenches day in day out, business and the like. They know you care, which is they don't care what you say if they don't think you care. This era was a pretty important time in coaching. It was pivotal, and you were definitely again pioneer for this kind of stuff. All your coaches around you at the time, you had a lot of good ones. You were leading the way. Did they instantly pick up and just run with this rhythm of relationship building? Because there was some different coaches coming out of the 80s, and I'll give you I'll ask for a couple of examples of a couple of coaches that you felt really weren't like you, but were, I guess, the closest to you that you kind of were around in the 80s and 90s. A couple of questions in one, sorry.
Yeah, I think the big thing was taking something from everyone, because what you got to understand is in the early 80s, mid 80s, even 90s, as I said, it was part-time. So Robert Walls didn't, and we would have 70, 80, 90 players turn up for pre-season training.
Mm.
I mean, you barely knew the captain's name, let alone, the 70th player on the list. So the system wasn't really set up to build relationships. Having said that, we would have pre-season camps where you could have a drink. So it was parties, perks, and ping pongs a bit. So, you'd get to know Wolsey a bit better over a beer and the senior players and all that sort of stuff. So, but it was a different time and different place. So I took things out of Robert Walls, David Parkin, Rod Austin, Robert Shaw, Ron Barassi, Rodney Eade. So all of them, you take something away from them. But then you mentioned the authenticity part. What does that mean? Because we chuck that around a bit, particularly in the corporate space, and it gets a little bit confusing. Just being yourself is really important. So as much as I took stuff from every one of those coaches, clearly, there's no question about that. Then you've got to work out, well, what's your own philosophy? And how do you weave all this stuff into this modern world of coaching? I mean, Rodney was probably the closest to me, Rodney Eade, because he was the coach I had when I finished. He was the coach that I had when we were fully professional. So he was the closest to my era, and we'd played against each other as well, so we knew each other pretty well. But you are taking things out of all of the coaches and trying to weave it together, but put it in what you want to do.
Very well said. That, and not trying to overcomplicate. It's so hard in football, sport, business when you're trying to be someone you're not. You're making you're making your life extremely hard. Number one, and people see through it pretty bloody quick. Number two, so if you're trying to be quote unquote buzzword authentic, it simply it's brilliantly said, and that goes for sportsmen and athletes and young people coming through as well. Just worry about your strengths, work on your strengths, and the RFIs will come along for the ride. But that's what you do really well on a team. So Sydney, you got this side. This side are very good footballers, clearly. And how did you get them to gel to each live and promote and love each other's superpowers and strengths, whilst obviously you've got some room for improvement areas every unit has. And then what were some of the, I guess, the points of difference? Now, this is when you start to bring in Tammy and other people and just brilliant stuff that really did create this culture, the Sydney Swans, the Bloods, whatever, that is just impenetrable.
Yeah, it was interesting. When was it? Not long ago, about a month ago, I did a retreat, which I run with some business partners in New Zealand, and Adam Goods was one of our guest speakers. And I interviewed Adam, and it was just fantastic. I'd never done this before. And what I said to Adam is I've always sort of run through my perspective of, what we set up and how we set it up. But I've never had a player that sort of sat with me, and I've asked through the lens of a player. So that was really good to get his perspective. And I think, from his point of view and from mine, but again, I can talk a little bit from the player's point of view now as well, which was fantastic. I think the timing was right. Some of our more senior players, now not that I don't know whether they would have embraced it, but certainly from Adam's point of view, I think he felt that the strong leaders that were leaving allowed the younger players to take some responsibility, which they hadn't done. And he admitted that he had some things he needed to work on. So I think the timing was right. I think, they did embrace it really quickly. I think the fact that we probably didn't have a lot of star players, we didn't have 10, 12 star players, that helped as well. I think we had a lot of guys, and I say this absolutely respectfully, sometimes this gets misconstrued, but we had a lot of role players. And by that, I mean, they would do anything to play their role. Jared Crouch, Ben Matthews, Brett Kirk, Craig Bolton, Leo Barry, this is my role and I'll just play my role. Now, every now and then we had players that went outside their role, don't get me wrong, but I'm just trying to give you the idea of why I think it worked so well, so quickly. We went down to Coffs Harbour for 2 days and we played in the preliminary final in 2003, which was extraordinary. So end of 2002, going into 2003, we were picked to finish, I think, from the age footy writers, 13 of the 16 age footy writers picked us to finish bottom of the ladder. So not 7th or 8th, bottom of the ladder. And we were 1 and 3, struggling, but then the players decided, and I always talk about this, it's about embracing a system and deciding what your behaviours are. Yeah, let's be really clear on what culture is. Culture is the behaviours reward and challenge, and players have an opportunity to accept it, do it, action it, or turn their back on it. And this group of players decided that they wanted to be great as the Bloods culture. Preliminary final in 2003, dropped away a bit in 2004. I think we started to get a bit selfish. Certainly early in 2005, we were a bit selfish and a bit individual. And then they pulled it back together unbelievably well. So I think it was a combination of a number of those things that helped.
Yeah, the buy-in, they help. But again, relationships and the respect for you, but also the know that you've got the care coming mutually the other way for them. Now, little things change. You had the systems that you wanted to really make steadfast. And if you've got your system and this kind of stuff, and you brought in your lovely wife, Tammy, who long time PhD in meditation and lots of different. Do you want to go into that a little bit? I know you did a course yourself in that era, and Tammy was brought in. Now, this is massive because this is a big moment, I think, in a big shift in mindset stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We did this in 2003 when no one was doing it. I did a course, I think, 10 years before that or whenever it was with Tammy. So we'd learn how to meditate. As you said, Tammy got a PhD, did a dissertation on meditation. So look, we brought her in, didn't make it compulsory, but we said to the players, here's a tool. And what I thought to myself is, having been a player for 17 years, I could have improved my 3K. We did 4Ks, you might improve it by 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Once you get to a certain level, your weights might go up from, X kilos to another 2 or 2.5. But what hadn't been worked on was the above the shoulders. That had never been worked on really, which was amazing. So that's the philosophy. How do we work above the shoulders? And it's no coincidence that the ones that have embraced it were our senior players: Adam Goods, Craig Bolton, Jude Bolton, Brett Kirk. The guys that did it relentlessly and religiously with Tammy, and it had a significant impact. And now it's just mainstream in AFL football clubs. But what we did back in 2003, I think it had never really been done before.
I hadn't. I think it's really important to touch on for many reasons. Because you say it's mainstream now. Just quickly, I've got the above the shoulders t-shirt on here. Roos, look at that, above the shoulders. Very good. That was a nice little play into there, mate. One of the programs we run there in the 100-day hero stuff. I love that, Roosy. Good on you, bro. Now listen, the 2003 and 4 stuff, that stuff there, it's mainstream now, but it's about being able to buy into it when it's mainstream. It's like the word authenticity or authentic.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean shit. It's just a word. If you can buy into it, it's just a practice. If you can do it, it's like anything. You're right. The biggest room for improvement in anything, in happiness, in life, in anything, is that above the shoulders factor. And the fact that you said the quote unquote players that had some really good individual and team success in those 3 or 4 years directly following, Brett Kirk, just absolute animal. And I know you love him and I love him as well. Just turned himself into an absolute beast, an amazing human, but amazing footballer. Obviously pivotal in a premiership, co-captain, nearly won the bloody Brownlow as a run with player. And all these other players, you mentioned them, but they aren't household names, but they are part of something that will never be taken away ever. And it's huge. I just love it so much, mate. 05, 06, you're coming through, you built the system, you're going, okay, we've got this platform and this system it makes you feel pretty good, because when you default in times of fatigue or if stuff goes a bit awry, you've still got this thing to come back to. Must make you feel good as a leader. Obviously, you want to keep evolving, but you're in a good place, 05, 06.
Yeah, I think you talk about under pressure, and that's when it all comes together. Like I've only just recently, there's a doco coming out next year, which is cool. So just about 2005, but you don't often revisit it. So I had an opportunity recently to revisit some of that stuff. And the goal that Nick Davis kicked probably epitomises everything you've said. We had no right to win that game. For those who don't remember, there's obviously some international viewers. We were about 5 points down or whatever we were, with about a minute to go. The ball's about 100 yards from the from the goal square. From that moment, from that throw in, everything had been practiced. Everything. Leo Barry went third man up. I think it was Luke Ablett, Barry Hall hit the ball back inside the goal square. Every single player that set up for that stoppage, under pressure, under fatigue, 120 minutes, players had run somewhere between 13 and 17 kilometres. At that stage when the ball was balled up, there was about 10 seconds to go. And that's what you're talking about. The ability to execute under pressure in a system that we'd practiced over and over and over and over and over and over again. And Nick Davis was in the right spot. Adam Snyder blocked for him. Jason Boyle hit the ball down. Players were in the right spot, dragging their opponents out, creating a channel. And that's exactly what you're talking about. So when you do get it right, it's incredibly powerful when it happens. And you understand how lucky you are the longer you're out of footy, that you are extremely fortunate to have a group of players that are absolutely committed to team first. And that's one of the big keys and one of the big sacrifices sometimes I have to make. And a lot of players and a lot of footy clubs just aren't able to do that.
No, then they're not. And organisations and all kinds of things. And as human beings are wired for their comfort, they're wired to look after themselves, they're wired to, which is obviously not a great thing. And in the way you make your own luck, but you did have a pretty special group in that era. And you think about the mindfulness stuff and the stuff to be able to, yourself and Tammy brought in, to be able to be in that moment 120 minutes in, lactic everywhere, everyone watching, not thinking about anything else or any other outcomes but the next contest ahead of them. That is what 3 years of mindset and meditation did as well. And that's the thing. People think it's not just the cameras, bloody filming, training, doing the coding. That's great. The fundamentals, awesome. The setups, the stoppage, awesome. But the ability to be able to calm themselves, be in the moment, present moment, all 18 blokes on the field and execute. So there's a lot of moving parts that go into, like you said, 20 seconds of play. Phenomenal. I just got goosebumps everywhere. Goosebumps everywhere, Roosy. I'm going to run through that brick wall. Make no mistake. Okay. 06, 07, obviously, we had some big success. You just missed the back-to-back and you moved through. You were clearly now you've found your calling, as if 350-odd games wasn't a calling, but this was huge. Moving through these times, you had a beautiful young family, Dylan, Tyler, and I know that they were a bit, upset when you finished up because they just loved it so much. And but we're going to get onto the fatherhood because I want to skip through. You coach Melbourne, brilliant. You did all that stuff, amazing things. But I really want to spend the next 20-odd minutes for the listeners. Just take this in. So you've always made Dylan and Tyler and Tammy and those people close a really huge priority. And you're really big on, I love this too, not waiting for big moments or waiting for milestones or getting a photo around a cake because it's a birthday. You just those little moments in time and life that I know you were always conscious with Dylan and Tyler as they were growing up, which I think is it's beautiful. And the more we all need to hear this, the better. And it's different, isn't it, to the 80s and the 70s and 80s and even 90s, different times. And I think we're a lot more emotionally available as well. So I guess take us through that coaching era. I'm trying to really lead into something, but the distinction of the coaching era, I'm not sure there's a harder job in Australia. I don't know if there is a harder job, to be honest, being a head coach of an Australian Rules footy club and still being a dad. And then take us through, I guess, where that's led you.
Yeah, you're right. I think the thing that, again, being intentional, we decided to coach as a group. I think that's an important conversation. Now, the boys, when I first, they were pretty young and they're like, Dad, no, you won't be here, blah, 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 blah. But I talk about life balance, not work-life balance. I think the work-life balance, again, confuses the situation because it's not like when I go to work, I haven't got a wife and 2 sons. And it's not like when I come home, I'm not the coach of the Sydney Swans. So I think if you look at it from the life balance point of view, is your life out of whack today? Did you spend too much time at work? And you might have to. I'm not saying you don't. Then you've got an opportunity to just bring it slightly back into, as opposed to saying, well, that's okay. That's work, Paul. Home Paul is he'll get there when he can, and that's home Paul. No. This is life, Paul. What does life, Paul, want to get? Again, it's not cutting corners in everything, but what it is then going, we're going to do this together. And in integrating where you can, your work and your home. And we did that great, well, as a club. You know, we knew when players and girlfriends and wives could be part of whatever it was. And equally, you know, the boys used to ask me when they were older, can I come in the box? And I'm like, guys, you can't come in the box. You're not coming in the box. So there's areas clearly you can't do. But one of the things that really hit me was when I was on a podcast with Dylan, and they said, you know, what do you remember most about your dad, Dylan, growing up? And I sort of expected, you know, grand final day, we were on the, you know, holding the cup and the podium, or, you know, I was patting Barry Hall on the back, or singing the club song with Mick O'Loughlin and Adam Goods. And what Dylan said was, I remember my dad getting on the midnight flight if he was playing in Perth. I remember he'd get on the midnight flight, all the players would get on the flight the next day, and he'd get back and come and coach me the next day. And it really hit me then that it's we think it's these big moments that drive our relationships with our families. You know, because I've taken them, I haven't seen them for 10 months, but I've taken on a month holiday to Europe or Aspen or whatever. You know, and it's not. And it really hit me then. It's not. You know, what he remembered out of all of that was, and yeah, there's other things clearly remembered, but it was the number one thing he said. And that really hit me again. I think that's a lesson to all of us. Don't wait for the big moment. If you've only got 5 minutes before bed, don't go and grab a tea. Go into the bedroom and grab a book and read the book to your son or your daughter, and kiss them goodnight. They'll remember that. You know, if you've got an hour before work, or you want to, we used to do this all the time. Thursday mornings, I would say breakfast time at Wallara, let's go, drop the kids off. And guess what happens? Everyone works around your schedule. Everyone says, well, where's Roosy today? Well, they don't ask where Roosy is on a Thursday after about week 3 or 4. They go, no, Roosy's down at Wallara with his kids. Oh, cool, no worries. What time's he in? I think he gets in about 9 o'clock. Oh, cool, no worries. I'll get back to him then. They're the thing. We've got to set our ground rules, and we've got to put our stakes in the ground. Now, again, that's not taking shortcuts. That's just taking opportunities when they present themselves. And I think that was a big part of what made the system work for the Roos family, but for the Sydney Swans Football Club and the players and the rest of the staff.
Brilliantly said. Roos family, Paul Roos family, parlays to the Swans, parlays out again. And there's too many people that it's by no fault of their own sometimes, or sometimes it is its ego, whatever, that they put something, this attachment on what people think about them, or how many hours they work, or this bloody car, or bloody rubbish title that doesn't mean happiness. And happiness doesn't usually, if you're not happy, you're not going to succeed fully anyway. So it's a weird coincidence. Sorry, it's a weird anomaly that you're not going to succeed. So happiness is everything. And those little moments you speak of, like we had Jordan Larson on 2 weeks ago, who's 4-time Olympic medalist, Roosy from Nebraska there. She's amazing, probably the go-to volleyball they call her, but everything is exactly we're talking like the same, me, you, Jordan. It's all about, she said, if I lived every day for that gold medal, then the same as you in the Premiership Cup, then it's a pretty miserable existence. So it's 5 minutes of satisfaction and happiness, and then you move on. And I love that Dill was young enough, but so in tune and intuitive enough to think about that. Remember that. The MCG on grand final day, nice photo, but the moments having a coffee and you flying back to coach him on a Sunday, just beautiful, mate. And again, if you listen to this and Paul might be talking to you, there's always time to change and flip the script. Like you don't have to go, oh, I'm too far gone. You're never too far gone to change. And Roosy, you'd be a big advocate for that.
I just did a talk with Dylan, and it's funny that someone asked a question exactly like that, you know, and Dylan said it. I didn't say it. He said, it goes, there's always time. Don't worry if you haven't done it up until this stage. Just change your behavior. And it was a really good, exactly what you said, mate. He said exactly the same thing, because the last thing you want people to think is, you know, I've failed or whatever. No. We've all done things that we wish we didn't do, but the smart ones are the ones that don't keep repeating them. You know, they're the ones that you go, I'm not sure why you said you weren't going to do it again, and you did it again, and then you did it again, and you did it again, and did it again. Yeah, because habits sometimes are hard to break. So just break the habit, do something slightly differently, and you'll keep getting incrementally better every day.
Yeah, You're amazing. And the compounding nature of that is huge. And you're not going to get, it's like anything. It's like you're doing the Hawaiian routine, a routine wherever you are in the world, your routine every day. And we all talk about routines and coming back to that because that eliminates thinking and eliminates barriers. Just do it. But if it is hard for people to break different habits, whether it's a workaholic or doing things for ego or other people's opinion, it might not be instantaneous, and you're certainly not going to get the instant feedback from your family and other people because you've possibly been vacant for, or emotionally distant for some. But it's about compounding effects and keep showing up and keep making the changes, and things happen. And if you need external help, get it. Don't be too proud. Get external help. I know obviously Roosy does a lot of this stuff now, Performance by Design and other companies, but it's about you having the wherewithal to go, okay, it's not, I clearly can't change it. I keep going back the same routes. Okay, well, how can I be happy? And if you're 75 years of age, 80 years of age, and you haven't exercised ever in your life, you can change that tomorrow. It's never,
I
ever,
think the
ever
thing,
too
mate,
late.
what you're saying is, and I talk about this a lot. It's interesting that great sports people have coaches. Can you think of one world champion or one elite sports person that hasn't had a coach? Roger Federer has just retired today or whatever, had a coach. Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, Usain Bolt, Michael Jordan. But then in other areas of our life, we feel embarrassed to have a coach. Like as a parent, I would love to, like Dylan's got a program, Prince the King, as you know. I was a good parent, but I wish I had a person like Dylan in Prince the King that could coach me and coach my sons, Dylan and Tyler. You know, corporate coaches, mindset coaches, meditation coaches. But we've still got a bit of a hurdle about that. I don't understand it. If the best athletes in the world need coaches, why don't we all have a coach or mentors? Now, we don't have to pay necessarily, but keep your eye open. There's people in all walks of life that can help you, but too often we walk past opportunities and we don't recognize those opportunities because ego takes over. Oh, I don't need help as a parent. Yes, you do. I don't need help as a CEO. Yes, you do. I don't need help as a player. Yes, you do. I don't need help as a coach. Yes, you do. We all need help. There's no such thing as a perfect human being.
Nah, that amazingly said, because it's a lot of the times it is ego. I don't need help. I need help. And then in the corporate sector, sometimes it's just like they just walk past it. Like you said, they're walking past all this help, walking past because they think, oh no, I'll be right, I'll be right. Maybe I'll take it, maybe I won't. Just pull the trigger and it's gonna save you so much time, energy, and anxiety and stress later, and you'll be so much happier and freer
Yeah.
and more clear. And you said something really good. I've heard you talk before. Obviously, you're an amazing parent and person, but our job is always, I can't remember if I don't want to butcher this. Our job is always to um, lead our children to be better parents or better people than us. And you can articulate it far better than me, but that was amazing. I just love that. So do you want to explain a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I always say this. Like, I hope my dad had a good dad, good mum and dad. Mum's still alive, dad's passed away. They were great parents, but I hope I was a better parent than my mum and dad were. You know, and I'm hoping Dylan and Tyler will be better parents than I am, because hopefully what they should aspire to is take the things that I've done well and Tammy's done well, and then work out the things that we haven't done well and say, look, I can do better than that. And that's whether that's John Longmire, you know, when I hand it over to John Longmire, it's like, well, John, I genuinely hope you're a better coach than me. Hopefully you take things from what I did, but I hope you're a better coach than me. And I think if we adopt that attitude, then we adopt as leaders a coaching, teaching mentality. But once again, I see too many CEOs and too many leaders that don't really coach. They just manage, or they continue to do stuff. They don't even stop doing, and they just manage. They don't lead and they don't coach. If you're a leader out there, you should be a coach in some way, shape, or form.
Love it. And you've said many times about this, and that we talk about authenticity and authentic, and leaders might hear you speak or love Roosy. Oh yeah, Roosy, love Roosy. He's the Phil Jackson of us. He's him and Phil Jackson are great. But then they'll listen to it all. They'll listen to what you've got to say or other leaders in industry. Um, they'll take it in and they'll go straight back. And it is, you've got to have it within you, but you can learn to change. If you're not a relationship builder, or you feel you got a surface niceties that's not very authentic, or people can see through you. your team, your players, your disciples, your pupils, they'll see through you straight away. And yeah, you'll be successful because you might be good at other stuff, but you're playing on a house of cards. Just for lack of better metaphors. I love it. Performance by design, you do this stuff a lot. Um, Before we get into some looser questions, a bit more fun stuff. Tell me about you got a lot of you got a lot of stuff going on, and I love them all because they all speak my language. Succinct them all, buddy. You got a few things on the go.
Yeah, so performance by design is great. I mean, what we do is we set a framework, we take the chance out of culture. So we try and help companies systemize culture like we did at Sydney. My business partner, Jared Murphy, worked with Bomber Thompson at Geelong. So, and we take the learnings from sport, but the combination of sport and business. I mean, there's so many similarities. They're intrinsically tied up now, really, because sport is a full-time business. It's no longer semi-professional. So, yeah, we create clear expectations, a clear culture code like we did with, Sydney Swans in 2003 to Coffs Harbour. We work out how we build relationships with each other, how we understand ourselves, self-awareness, awareness of our team, what makes our team tick, how we influence each other, how we work collectively together, and then we teach people how to have honest conversations. Then we systemize that approach. So, it's great. We work with a lot of different companies. People ask me all the time, what's your ideal company? I'm like, well, anyone that's got people, which is pretty much every single company has people. But too often, I think even that, mate, is, we put people first. They say that, but they don't do it. Or they've got a beautiful poster on the wall that says supportive, honest, loyal. Everyone lies to each other. No one helps each other, and everyone backstabs. So just because you got a nice shiny poster or a purpose, doesn't necessarily mean you've systemized culture. You need role model leaders that bring those behaviors to life, that if you say you're going to do something, they do it. So the role model has to be the leader. Gary Wilson was the best player at Fitzroy and the best role model, because what he said, there's a really good quote from Michael Jordan in The Last Dance. And for those your viewers, listeners that haven't seen it, it's The Last Dance about Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson. And what he said was, because he was copping a bit of flack about his leadership. Now, that's in the mid 80s and 90s, as I discussed. But what he said was, you can ask my teammates, and I never asked them to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And really, that's the epitome of leadership. And I think, so we try and systemize culture for people, and we try and take the chance out of culture.
Nah, really, and it's good because, like you said, we default to that when things are a bit full on. If you've got deadlines or you got stuff on the go, you're not going to default to your old ways and treating people like a number or just another dollar sign in business, if that's the case, or in sport in other ways. And if you talk about it at Coffs Harbour and you have it up there and you live and breathe it, and it's part of your DNA, it becomes part of your DNA. Even if there's been plenty of 22-year-old selfish people that became 26-year-old beautiful humans that just take all the humans around them and lift them up. So this is what I'm saying. If you're 75, listen to this, it's never too late. Tell me about the Prince to King, because I've loved this from afar.
Yeah, so Dylan's done a program. I think he started about 5 or 6 years ago. I remember him, I was downstairs in my house in Brighton. He said, Dad, can you come up? And I went upstairs, and he went to a great school, and he was always a bit critical of not the school, but the fact that they didn't really learn a lot around the social side of being a young male. And he read me through a program. I'm like, Dylan, I think you're onto something here, because as you know, mate, like particularly boys, when they get to 13, they stop listening to mum and dad. And Dylan jokes about it all the time. I coached him in footy, and do you reckon he'd listen to me when I was coaching him footy? No, of course not, because I'm his dad. But would he listen to, a younger mentor? Absolutely. So it's based on that philosophy of him setting up a mentorship for young men, teaching them about healthy habits, healthy systems. You've got, all that social media now, and Instagram and games, PlayStations, Call of Duty, mate. We used to play Pong in my day and pinball. So you'd only play that for so long now. So all that stuff that parents are dealing with now, mate, Dylan's program is fantastic. So I help out with that, which is great. Really enjoy it, really helping the parents, helping the kids. And we've just put together a sort of free Roos leadership group as well, So you can get on my LinkedIn. I'm always responsive on LinkedIn as well. So jump on LinkedIn. You can normally see what I'm up to. And but I'm passionate about teaching leadership, helping people, putting an old head on young shoulders, for want of a better term, and passing on all the experiences that I was fortunate, in some ways unfortunate to have, but trying to shortcut people's success in that leadership culture space.
Yeah, well succinct, mate. It's perfect. And in the business of making people better, which is there can't be anything better than that. And if you become the best version of yourself, then everyone else, your true purpose and your true why, family or other things that you really care about, and you're gonna lead you guys. And obviously what we try to do as well, yourself, Dill, everyone, Tammy, Performance Pod is on. You're trying to create generational wellness and generational education forever. And it's just,
Yeah.
and that's the happiness and that's the moments of you flying back on the red eye, like that just gives you goosebumps. Just love it, mate. And you can't not succeed if you're happy. You can't not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
got the nuggets everywhere from Roosy in Hawaii. I'm just going to finish with a couple of, mate. I just make these ad lib ones off the cuff
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No
Best
worries.
surf, you surf, best surf break in Hawaii. What do we got there? Down are you in Honolulu or Waikiki?
Yeah, Honolulu. I'm not a surfer. I go out every now and then, but by far the most spectacular is Pipeline. Like, to go around there, if anyone that wants to come to Hawaii, like if you're fortunate enough to get there on a big day, like I watch it sit there and I can't believe anyone could surf it. It's just spectacular. You could literally spend a day there sitting there watching these guys and girls that just are incredible. And there's so many of them. I remember we were there one day, and I reckon this little kid, now he wasn't surfing Pipeline, but he was surfing right next to Pipeline. I don't know what all the breaks are called, but the one right outside the life guard. And he would have been, mate, I reckon 6 or 7 or 8. And he had this little bright green surfboard. And I was sitting there with Tammy. He said, have a look at this little kid. And he was just shredding the waves like you wouldn't believe. And I thought to myself, man, that kid does not, he doesn't know how lucky he is.
That's a mate. One's I'm no good. I'm barely boggy. I'd be able to boogie board down at the peninsula down here, mate. But it's very one sport I've always looked from afar and go, I'd love. Like
Yeah.
obviously it takes reps, takes lots of reps, but amazing. And you're living in that is the Mecca. Talk about the MCG being the Mecca. You got the Mecca of surfing right there. So you obviously Honolulu there. Now, favorite American sport and what's your current day American sportsman that you really love?
Yeah, I played a lot of basketball as a kid, so I've always followed the NBA, probably more so than any other sport. I love the NFL. I'm probably warming a bit more to the NFL now because of the individuality of NBA. It drives me crazy a bit now, the way they play the game.
Me too.
Probably my favorite player would be Nikola Jokic. I think just his humility,
Mm.
his talent. You talk about balance, everything we've sort of spoken about today, mate. He's humility. He's just so humble. Like, for those who don't know him, look him up. He's from is he from Serbia? I think he is, or Belgrade, from somewhere over there.
He's
I think
from
it's Serbia.
he's from Serbia and he doesn't
Yeah.
he's self-professed doesn't really like the game.
No, it's incredible watching, but he's so good and so humble.
He's a good person.
He's three-time MVP, one-time champion. So he's probably someone that I just resonate with, not just for his skills, but also, he's such a humble guy.
He seems a great person and a great leader, a great person to be around, that's a leader. Actually, off the cuff, back on the leadership, you said a good quote from you is, you can tell how good a leader you are by the amount of weddings your team invites you to and birthdays. Love that. So if you're a leader out there, you've never been on one of your employers' weddings, maybe have a look, maybe have a chat to Roosy. No, Jokic, all Nikola Jokic wants to do is bloody go back home and ride and race his racehorses. He's a very funny
Yeah,
man. He's taken the piss at the moment with his averages, by the way. He's averaging
yeah.
ridiculous numbers as we speak. Okay, back one for I need one or maybe two for the footy nuffies, but I need to make it quick. Most talented you were ever in the vicinity of or played on in the 80s and 90s footballer.
I'm going to go with Gary Ablett Jr., probably a bit later than that. So let me go with two, just so I would say probably Bernie Quinlan,
The
who I
super
played
boot.
Super Boot, and for those of you who don't know, looking him up, 6'5", unbelievable athlete, Brownlow medal midfielder, but kicked 100 goals as a full forward. incredibly talented. And then the one I coached against, and probably the best player I've ever seen is Gary Ablett Jr. I think his ability to turn a 30-70 contest into a win, his skills, his decision-making, his toughness, when he was at his best, he was untouchable. So I think Gary Ablett Jr. for me is the best player I've seen.
From Paul Roos, who is the greatest in my anecdotal opinion, is the greatest coach of all time. To say that, Gary Ablett, I'll take that one. He is, as a human watching the game, was one of the great Rovers midfielders of all time. But I was expecting you to say um, other players, so I love that. He is the greatest, in my opinion, as well. I love watching him. But as a 30-70 contest, that's a really good analogy, because he definitely played every single contest on its merits, and he never believed he was beaten in anything.
Nah.
So great call, really, really great call. Last one, mate. Not as sport related, but the next 30, 40 years for Roosy, we'll get you back at least once or twice every couple of years. What's it hold for Roosy? I know you've said with the beautiful work stuff. What can you see yourself envisaging Roosy in the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, look, I love doing it. I think you hit the nail on the head. I like making people better and, passing on my experience and being around good people. I think the older you get, the crankier you get a bit, and your circle closes a bit more because you get less tolerant of people. But in terms of, the coaching and the teaching, I love doing that. I love working with Dylan. I love hanging out with Tyler, and he still plays footy, and love helping him when I can as well. We love traveling. I love traveling with the family, love traveling with Tammy. So travel's right at the top of the list at the moment. Family's my number one priority, always has been. Got a grandson, Rainer. I love hanging out with Rainer, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, family, travel, and leadership and culture. They're probably the three things that I see myself doing for. Hopefully, I've always joked that I get to 100 because I want a letter from the Queen, but I'm not going to get one of them now, am I? So because the Queen's unfortunately passed away. So, but yeah, I always sort of joked I'll get to 100, but who knows? We'll see.
You'll get over that. You'll get one from Charles or William, mate. No, very, very good. Love. Congratulations on Rainer.
Yeah, Rainer. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful name. Love that. And the travel, what's next? What's the go-to that you haven't? Is there any you haven't been that you want to get to?
Yeah, I'd love to go to Antarctica. That's probably one that I haven't been to that I've heard is incredible. So that's probably, but you've obviously a small window to get to somewhere like that. That's probably the one that I haven't done that I really, really desperately want to go to. Probably the next port of call is somewhere in Europe next year, which would be great.
I love that, mate. Now we'll get to Antarctica. You'll see some photos of Roosy there. You'll take something out of that for your coaching stuff as well. But because that is very, very fortitude building. This book here, mate, this is just off the cuff as well. Iron War, Mark Allen and Dave Scott. Unsure if you've got it, but it's about the 1989 Ironman World Championship on Kona. Now, I reckon, I've just made this up, but I reckon the listeners and viewers will be all over this. Why don't we get Roosy in the next 5 years doing the Hawaiian Ironman? You'll be amazing at that, bro. You're local there now.
Mate, I'm lucky. I think what's enabled me to keep running is the fact that I've always put a limit on how far I run. And my body's actually really good. So I just look. We were in Kona one year, and we landed. I'd forgotten the Kona was on, and we landed, and I thought, geez, there's a roadblocks, and where is everyone going? And then I realised that that Kona was on. And a lot of the athletes were staying at the hotel we're staying at. The next day, let me tell you, you could tell everyone that had competed in the Ironman the day before because they could barely walk. Not only that, and I didn't realize this, but you'll love this. So when they were riding their bikes, they're obviously hunched over. And a lot of the ladies have the sort of bra type tops on and their shoulders were almost indented because the sun just beats down. And I remember this one lady walked past and she almost had like these blisters running down each shoulder blade. And I thought, where'd she get them from? Then I realized, well, hang on, you're on the bike for 180 kilometers and you're hunched over. And let me tell you this, and you would know, if you want to pick a worst place to have a triathlon, you couldn't pick one Kona. It is a volcano. It is windy. And it is stinking, stinking hot.
That's why the appeal, mate. Like this was started. I love this event, obviously, but
Yeah.
1979 or whatever, with bloody 15 of them. It quickly grew, and as Aussies, we Greg Welsh and that watching that in the mid 90s,
Yeah.
and it quickly grew in popularity. And now, mate, it's bloody more popular than a Taylor Swift concert. You got to qualify for the thing, you got to roll in.
Yeah.
But
100%.
oh well, that's just something I've planted that. I'll let it sit. We'll keep revisiting every time we have a chat. But I do respect the way you do look after yourself and know your limits. Like 20 years of professional sport, and then all the tennis and football, basketball before that, and then the ability to still be running, mate, on the body. Lesser people with lesser, I guess, knowledge and awareness of their body would not be looking like you right now. So you've done a great job there. I reckon you'll be living till 100 and you'll be running till 100. Roosy, I really, mate, we love you. I love you. And I love and appreciate that you've given another hour from your time over there, mate. The listeners and viewers would have taken so much out of that. So much over. I reckon that's one of ones, guys, that you click the show notes, listen to Paul over and over and over again. Check out those websites. We'll whack them in the show notes, of course. But go to Dill's Insta, Roosy's Insta, Prince the King, and Performance by Design, of course. We love you and appreciate you, mate. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, mate. That was great. Always a pleasure.
You're a star. And I love your roof. It's a beautiful roof. Listeners, you've had a great hour with Roosy. He's the king. He's the absolute Phil Jackson of Australia. He's the king. We appreciate you, and it is a magnificent day to be alive.